In this video, I will tell you 3 real horror stories. If you are ready, grab your coffee and sit back. Here we go. It all started with a simple shopping trip. At least that's what I thought. But something about that night felt off. Last year, I went to our neighborhood mall to buy a birthday gift for my wife. After nearly 5 years of marriage, I still had no idea what to get her. Other than the usual flowers or generic presents, I always try to pick out a nice piece of jewelry or something thoughtful. Though honestly, most of it looks the same to me. To better understand what she liked, I listened in when she got together with her friends, hoping to catch hints or preferences. That evening, I headed to the mall, a big, well-kept place, pretty quiet as it was nearing closing time. I wandered aimlessly for a while until I came across a jewelry shop. Inside, I found a lovely necklace that I thought she'd really like, just in case I messed up again. I didn't have a solid idea of what I wanted when I walked in, but after browsing, I discovered another small store nearby that sold both jewelry and women's clothing. I figured I might find something else there too. The shop was small, neatly organized but packed with merchandise. At the entrance, I noticed a woman browsing, and behind the central front desk stood a lone employee. The quiet made sense. Closing time was near. After browsing a bit, the staff member asked if I needed help, and I explained my situation. She offered some advice, and I started to narrow down my options. That's when something strange happened. While I was near the back corner of the store, I saw something, or someone, that didn't belong. Behind a rack of clothes, crouched down behind a box, was what appeared to be a man. His posture was low, like he was hiding, but the clothes partially concealed him, making it hard to see clearly. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he dropped something. But the longer I looked, the weirder it felt. I called out to him, asking if he was okay. No response. I pushed aside the hanging clothes to get a better look. That's when he looked up. Without saying a word, he stood up abruptly and bolted out of the store. I stood there frozen, unsure whether he was trying to steal something or worse. Either way, his reaction left me uneasy. I tried to shake it off and spent 10 more minutes shopping before heading to the checkout. But just as I stepped out of the store, I saw him again. He was sitting on a bench across from the store entrance, staring at me, or maybe at the shop. His expression was unreadable, but the way he watched gave me a knot in my stomach. Why was he still there? Was he planning to go back in? I turned around and went back into the store. I told the employee what had happened and warned her in case he returned. She was surprised. She hadn't even realized anyone had been hiding in the store. She thanked me and said she'd call mall security if there were any more issues. As I exited again, the man was still there. I hesitated, considering confronting him. But before I could say a word, he stood up and quickly walked away toward the exit. I didn't chase him. I just watched as he vanished into the night. To this day, I still wonder what he was doing there, and what might have happened if I hadn't seen him. I worked for a cell phone company at one of those kiosks in the center of mall walkways a few years ago. Although the work was usually not too bad, occasionally people would stop and ask questions about the service, especially since it was a large mall with a lot of foot traffic. Thankfully, I was spared from having to deal with customers like the perfume sprayers and shoe polishers. I used to just sit in my chair and ignore the people trying to sell things like cologne or shoe shines. But I was happy to help anyone who was actually looking at the phones or had questions. I also did a lot of people watching, which was always entertaining. One day I worked a shift from afternoon until closing and probably saw hundreds, if not thousands, of people pass by. The mall was pretty busy when I started my shift. A few customers stopped to chat, but mostly I just sat there scrolling on my phone and casually glancing around. Then I started to notice this one man. He walked by several times in the late afternoon. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with graying hair. He wore black jeans and a gray sweater, and I only paid attention because I saw him again about 10 minutes later. When he passed by a third time, I thought, wow, that's the third time I've seen that guy. From then on, I made a point not to stare when people were nearby. I was just enjoying my shift and ready to help customers if needed. But by the fourth time he passed, I began to think he was kind of strange. Then I figured maybe he was just a mall walker. A lot of people like to get their exercise by walking laps around the shopping mall. I continued to see him over the next 2 hours. As night fell and the mall neared closing time, one thing stayed the same. I was still seeing the guy. Around 7 p.m., he walked by again and gave me a quick glance. I saw him once more right before 8 p.m., and again he gave me a strange look. I stayed on my phone for the next half hour or so. After 8:30, I saw him again. He would walk in one direction, then circle back the other way, each time giving me this slightly off-putting expression. It was starting to feel less like mall walking and more like something else. The last time I saw him was probably around 9 p.m., just before I closed the kiosk. I packed up and left around 8:55. I was still curious about the guy, but I didn't see him as I walked through the mall to the parking lot and out to my car. The drive home to my apartment took less than 10 minutes. I remember walking straight into my living room as soon as I got back. I lived in a very normal apartment on the second floor of the building. A little while later, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my place. It happened a few times. Since the building was usually pretty quiet, I started to get a bit suspicious. I got up, walked to my door, and looked through the peephole. At first, I saw nothing. Then I heard footsteps again, getting closer. Eventually, I saw the same man from the mall walking right past my door, staring at my apartment with that same unsettling look. He walked past, and about a minute later, he came back and did the exact same thing. At that point, I started to get genuinely scared. I had never seen him before that day. What was he doing here? I ran to my bedroom and shut the door. I didn't want to hear anything or see him again. I turned on the TV to try and distract myself, and eventually I managed to fall asleep. The next morning, he was gone. Was it all a prank? A coincidence? I still can't explain it. Did he follow me home? I'm almost certain he didn't live in the building because I never saw him again. When I was a teenager, I lived in the same area and went to the same school as my best buddy Jake. I think I was about 16 when I was hanging out at Jake's place. I remember his other friend, a guy named Parker, who didn't go to our school, stopping by one day while we were playing video games in the basement. I didn't really know Parker, even though we lived in the same area and had hung out together a bit in Jake's basement. After a while, Parker said he was going to an abandoned retail area nearby and asked if we wanted to come with him. I had lived in the city my entire life, so I had some knowledge of the mall, which was across town from my house. Jake lived very close to it, and it was an old mall that I had been to a number of times when I was a little kid with my parents. Jake was really excited to see it again because the place had closed in the early 2000s. Conversely, I hadn't actually intended to go to any abandoned locations since I didn't think they were all that interesting. But I said, "Sure, Parker," since I didn't have anything better to do. Jake and I left his house and walked down a street to the end of the walkway. We crossed a pedestrian bridge over a freeway, and a few streets later, we arrived at the back parking lot of the mall. It had only taken about 10 minutes from Jake's house, and I hadn't realized how close the mall was. Seeing the mall now, still intact, was intriguing, but definitely felt abandoned. The parking area had a lot of grass and weeds growing through every crack and space. The paint in the parking spots was so faded it looked nearly white, and the pavement was a very light gray. I have no idea why they never demolished the entire property or did anything with it. We began to approach. Then we came to a door that had no handle but was slightly open. I didn't really want to go inside, and I didn't think Parker or Jake planned to either. But evidently, they did. They all approached the door, Parker swung it open, and we went inside. A beer bottle was holding the door open. I immediately asked if Parker had been in the mall before, and he said he had. All the lights were off, so we had to use our phone flashlights to see, but it wasn't totally dark because the mall had some natural light coming from the ceiling in most of the walkways. When we first arrived, we were in what looked like a former store, and aside from some old carpet, it was completely empty. Then we entered one of the main mall walkways, which was kind of cool, but everything else was gone. We explored for a bit and then moved on to a different, darker hallway. The entire time I felt a little uneasy because there were still signs and remnants of signs, a few old advertisements, and bits of the old store design still visible. We were in a quieter hallway when I suddenly heard footsteps farther down, so we all stopped and listened. It felt like we had stepped back in time 10 years. The footsteps stopped too, so we turned around and pointed our lights, but we couldn't see very far. We were spooked enough to want to turn around, but instead we kept going down the hallway. A little while later, we heard footsteps again, this time behind us in the distance, and it felt like someone was inside the mall, which was clearly abandoned. I remember Parker calling out. We turned down another hallway and Parker said he knew a way that led back to where we came in. So we walked down a few more corridors. Honestly, I had no idea where we were anymore. It was really dark the whole time. Then he shouted, asking if anyone was there and saying we were just lost and would leave if we weren't supposed to be there. I thought maybe it was a security guard or the police at that point, but there was just silence. Suddenly, we heard footsteps again, this time much louder and much closer, and they were running in our direction. The three of us started running, and none of us looked back. After a minute or so, I still heard footsteps following us, and I finally saw the main hallway near where we had entered. We ran straight into the store we had first entered through and found the exit door. We dashed off the property and across the parking lot before stopping to catch our breath. We walked all the way back to Jake's house since whoever was in the mall stayed inside. I went back home after a little while. Whether it was another explorer or someone else, none of us knew who was in the mall. I figured it was either a homeless person or maybe someone using drugs, or just someone trying to scare us. We never went back to that mall again. It made us all uneasy. I liked working at a clothing store in the mall when I was younger, and that was enough for me. So are you afraid of mirrors as much as you are afraid of the shopping mall? Then take a look at this video